Hey everybody, this is Seth Haynes from Musician's Guide to Hustling.com. I am really excited today to have Mark Rabideau from. Am I saying the last name right? Rabideau or Rabideau?
Yeah, Rabideau, Rabideau.
Rabideau. That's what I thought I'd heard, but I just want to make sure. I should have asked that before we started recording. So I'm really psyched to have Mark here with us today. Mark is a cultural entrepreneur, and he's also the director of the 21st Century Musician Initiative at DePaul University. DePaul with a W, and Mark, there's so much I could say about you and your work. Can you just give us a little bit of an intro and just a little bit of background about yourself and some of the work you're doing at DePaul University?
Sure, I'll give you a quick kind of rock hop through my career.
Sure, sure.
I think in many ways I was an incredibly traditional student. I went to the University of Illinois as a trombone performance major. Decided I really wanted to play in the Chicago Symphony, so I went and studied with Mr. Frank Crisafulli, who played in the CSO for 50 years.
Wow.
My goal was to win his job and play in an orchestra the rest of my life and stop thinking and just make music. And then, of course, when his job came open, I auditioned and I did not win the job. And a young guy with an Australian accent at 30 years old won it. And that gig was going to be locked up for 40 more years. And so I had to reimagine my plan. And so things moved and shifted in traditional and pretty non-traditional ways from that point on. I was about to go back and get a doctorate, and I was offered a sabbatical replacement. So I did some teaching and did a variety of things. I thought I really did enjoy the university life. Got the doctorate, won a tenured position, but the position was split. It was in the studio. I'm a trombonist, but it was also the director of a music business program at a small regional institution.
Okay.
And through that experience and really taking seriously the business of the arts, I really started locking in, not 100% on the business side, but rather on the entrepreneurship side.
Absolutely.
And while I was in that position, I decided to launch an organization called Artists Now, which was just outside of New York City. It was a not-for-profit 501c3. We did some, I think, brilliant community engagement pieces, concerts. We worked with some remarkable artists. We hosted an annual Celtic Music Festival, which was just about as fun as anything I've ever been involved with.
Sure.
And I really enjoyed working with the community, working with the board, working with donors, and kind of fell in love with that piece. At the same time, I was hosting a radio show on the Upper West Side of Manhattan at a club called Smoke, a weekly radio show called Live from Smoke, Monday nights with John Farnsworth. John was and still is a dear friend from many years ago. He's from a very, very successful family of musicians. His brother Joe is arguably the greatest jazz drummer alive. He plays with McCoy Tyner and records with Wynton Marsalis. And,
wow.
and I'm just really a litany of remarkable jazz artists. And so it was John and Joe and people like Harold Mayburn, who recorded with Miles Davis, and the great Dr. Eddie Henderson. It was a beautiful life story as well as a remarkable artist, and Eric Alexander, just a great group of people that I had a chance to meet in that space and produce that radio show. It actually initially launched as a student entrepreneurship project, and they were a pretty remarkable group of kids. This thing had 255,000 weekly listeners.
Wow.
So when you think about the power of kids, weekly listeners every Saturday night. We aired on Monday night. I mean, we recorded on Monday nights, and then we aired the following Saturday night. So anyway, that was a really fun moment for me. And just as I was signing on to do a 2-year postdoc at Rutgers University in what was called the Center for Creativity at the time, life circumstance changed, and I moved from the East Coast out to Wyoming to take on a very traditional role as just a straight-up trombone professor and faculty member in the jazz area, teaching improvisation and big band. But I continued to go back and forth for a few years, both to do the postdoc, which was an amazing group of very creative-minded people doing remarkable work, and thinking not only about the act of creativity, but really the processes behind the creative act.
Sure.
And then ran Artists Now for 2 more years until I stepped down at that time. After Wyoming, life throws you bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Over 19 knows what I'm talking about already. And so abruptly, I decided to leave the University of Wyoming to follow 3 pretty awesome kids and my ex-wife to Louisville, Kentucky. And one of the things that I love about the mindset of the entrepreneur is that it is about the act of invention, and sometimes that's about your business or your life's work, but sometimes that's about life itself. And so I, for the second time, left a tenured position to be with my children. Moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which is a great town, without any work prospect in front of me, and was lucky to land a position at the University of Kentucky in Lexington down the road as the director of the undergraduate program in arts administration. And I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for the diverse career I had coming into that, which made that feasible, right? Being not just simply being a trombone professor, but taking on the work very early in my career as the director of the music business and technology program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Launching, and so that's something that's, that obviously is valuable, but also, and then really embracing those opportunities and really capitalizing on those opportunities, but also taking the initiative to launch Artists Now, the radio show, and a million other projects, allowed my resume to read to those people as something legible and something worth engaging.
Totally.
I loved being at the University of Kentucky. I'd actually, we had an opportunity to develop a fully online master's program that was remarkable. I went in not knowing what online learning could look like, and I could tell you it was spectacular. I had students in my classes simultaneously from New York, LA, New Delhi, Stockholm, off the coast of Africa, and truly around the world. And it made for some engaging and really memorable moments, and also some dear friendships that I hope to keep for a lifetime. I had signed on, I had agreed to become the associate dean there of the College of Fine Arts, very excited to do so. And then I was asked to do it, and I said, I'd happy to do it. They said, wait 2 weeks and then we'll take your yes. And I said, I didn't have to wait 2 weeks, but they asked me to do that. And during that 2-week window, I got a call from a guy named Mark McCoy, who's now the president of DePauw University, telling me that he was launching the 21st Century Musician Initiative. And when sharing a little bit more about it, he said that my colleagues would be advisory board chair Yo-Yo Ma, members of the board Greg Sandow and Joe Horowitz, some of those cute-looking guys from Time for Three.
Yeah.
Great bass player and dear friend and colleague Peter Seymour from Project Trio.
Yeah, Peter's great.
Carolyn Shaw, the youngest Pulitzer Prize winner for the composition, and some really terrific thinkers, both in that board and also already on the ground at DePauw University. And so now I serve in that capacity, and I'll kind of wrap up by saying I kind of feel like I have 3 jobs. One is as a faculty member teaching in the program. I teach with Peter Seymour a class called 21st Century Chamber Music Concepts, which is just a joy to work with Peter and to impact students, to get them to reimagine what chamber ensembles could look like in the 21st century. Music entrepreneurship, class called State of the Art. So on campus, I do some teaching. I manage the artist residencies we bring in every year. We have some incredible groups. We've had a Far Cry in recently. We had Dakota out of the Carnegie Hall affiliated ensemble.
Yeah.
I help envision the concert series there. We bring in some pretty remarkable 21st century musicians. I also oversee a lot of the community engagement. I run a space called Music on the Square, which is both a preparatory program for young people. This is embedded within a small community, Putnam County, with 10,000 people total. That's about 2 blocks squared where you're sitting right now, Seth.
Yeah.
But
down here in Philly, yeah.
Yeah, down there in Philly. But, this is a community-wide effort to really engage people, especially those at the margins. Every single kid who has free and reduced lunch privileges has the opportunity to study for free, knowing that the transformative powers of the arts change lives, and we want to change those kids' lives for the better. What else we do? It's an alternative venue. We kind of look at a Le Poisson Rouge type venue. We do a lot of interesting, innovative concerts in that space, and we do a lot of adult learning in that space as well. We have an upcoming program called Jazz on Tap. You get to learn how beer is made, and first, and we're also bringing in the great Afro-Peruvian jazz artist Gabriel Alegria from New York City, originally from Lima, Peru, so that you can learn something about how jazz is made through some really stunning, innovative artists, as well as have a good evening out. And then I also am involved in the National Dialogue, which is executed in a lot of ways. As I mentioned, I just came back from being in your hometown of Philly with some really engaging colleagues at Curtis Institute, but also at New England Conservatory.
Yeah.
And Eastman and some other schools that are really working hard to reimagine what their students' futures might look like, can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that more in just a little bit.
Yeah, and then also a bunch of other national efforts, but I try to write some, and then I'm the publisher of an online resource music magazine called 21cm.org. We go live tomorrow with a brand new issue. This has been up for about 16 months now. We were able to, within a month or two, get about 1,000 monthly viewers, unique visitors. Now we have about 20,000 unique visitors. So people seem to...
Outstanding.
Yeah, thanks. People seem to respond to the site. We have a short issue this month because we're doing a special issue about something I think you and I will be talking about, the 21 Symposium mid-month. Mm-hmm. But we have articles this upcoming month featuring or asking questions about the role global music should be playing in the way we prepare musicians for the 21st century. And we have Phil Gallo, who's done a lot of great writing for us, but also for the New York Times and a lot of other substantial publications, who's written a beautiful article I'm really excited about. And then also we have an opportunity to kind of detangle the Global Musician Workshop, which happens on our campus, founded by Mike Block, the great innovative world music cellist, member of the Silk Road Ensemble, and who Yo-Yo Ma says is the quintessential 21st century musician. I hope that's all the talking you want me to do. I'm
I was like, all right, sounds good.
Right. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. We'll talk later. So, yeah. So wow, I could probably sit here and pepper you with questions for hours about just the intro itself. But so before we even get into some of these lessons that you've learned along the way and some of the characteristics of, you've gotten to work with all these amazing people and all these amazing organizations. But before we talk about that, you mentioned something that is a really interesting point that I think a lot of people that are kind of from the outside looking in, thinking about how do I start my own ensemble or something within a university or whatever it might be. Can you just talk for just very briefly about the structure of how nonprofits work? So you mentioned, this kind of made my head spin the first time I was in the weeds with it when I was working for an orchestra. But there's so many people in play to make organizations happen. Can you just talk very briefly about the structure of some of these organizations and how some of these projects come to fruition? There's the community and the audience to consider. There are board members that are you're trying to help it come along. There's donors. There's a whole kind of infrastructure behind every project. Can you just talk very briefly about what that is and what it looks like for folks that may be looking at how to start something but can't even begin to wrap their head around it?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll use Artists Now, which was a small size arts organization. And that's likely where most people start. When I started that, it was really a couple one-offs to start. There were a few projects I just wanted to do. I had recently moved to a small community in Highland Park, New Jersey, and I really wanted to make that a space where my kids would be, where my kids would thrive artistically. And really, I wanted to connect my kids to some great artists. That was probably where it started. So a lot of times I mention that because you really want it to be something you're passionate about, something that has a very specific meaning to you. For me, it was about bringing in world-renowned artists into my kids' lives and into my community's life. So it began very oddly that I had just finished a radio show with the great Dr. Eddie Henderson. If you don't know Eddie's story, we could talk about it the rest of the time, but he grew up in the shadow of the Harlem Renaissance. His mom danced with Duke Ellington in her cotton club.
Wow.
His mom's roommate was the great Billie Holiday, and his babysitter was Lena Horne. But Ella Fitzgerald was in and out of there. He took his first trumpet lesson with Louis Armstrong when he was visiting.
Wow.
And later,
that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. It's more than that. He studied with Miles. He went on to become the first professional African-American figure skater. Then he went on and got a psychiatric doctorate and was a practicing psychiatrist in San Francisco until he got a call from Herbie Hancock and said, come on out on the road with me. And he stayed on the road with Herbie for more than a decade. So Eddie is just this remarkable individual. So I had just done a radio show, and my son Luke said, hey, Dad, he's second grade at this time, real curious kid. which is important to the story. And he said, "Hey, Dad, it's Black History Month, and I have to do a report. And I'm thinking about doing something on, Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman." And I said, "Well, those are important figures, buddy, but there's some people right now in the world doing some remarkable things whose stories need to be told." And I told him a little bit about Eddie. And he said, "Well, do you think I could interview Mr. Henderson on the phone?" I said, "Well, I just met him. He's a real nice gentleman, very stately gentleman. But I said, let's go over what this would look like." So I called Eddie. We made an arrangement. And Eddie was in Italy at the time. And Luke spoke with him, did his interview, and did a really beautiful job, real gentleman. And then he added a last-minute question. He said, "Hey, Dr. Henderson, I'm giving my report on Tuesday. Do you think you could come and play your trumpet?" Right? and all of a sudden, I'm like, and I get on the phone, and there's Eddie. It's like, "Mark, yeah, I'm going to need some directions to Irving Elementary." Yeah. Eddie flew in. He was coming to New York anyway. Flew in and played his trumpet at Luke's school.
Wow.
And I'll tell you something funny about that. He was really nervous about it. He said, "I never played for kids before. I hope I do okay." I said, "Irving seemed to like you a lot. I think you do all right." So anyway, that night I thought, okay, let's throw together a house party here and introduce this community to this remarkable musician who's just impacted all of their children through community engagement in the public schools. And so very last minute, we threw this together. We did it in a beautiful home of a friend, and people responded to this, and they wouldn't let go of this. And they really wanted more of this. And it was something that I was really happy to have connected my kids to. And this grew to become, a six-figure annual, not a big organization, small organization, sure, annual budget where we did outreach into the public schools for community engagement. We did after-school classes. We did improvisation classes for kids. We did adult learning classes. We did a series of house parties that paid for all of this. We did concerts in unlikely venues because we worked only within the confines of the small community. And the structure of it became very clear in the roles that I think your audience will play is you need somebody who's passionate about it, that's going to drive the organization. I paid for that for about 5 years, all out of my own pocket because it mattered to me. Sure. And when I say that is not everybody's in a position to invest that kind of money. And I'm not certain I was either, to be truthful. But it mattered to me deeply enough, and my passions drove. But there was an important point where I realized I can't do it on my own. So I reached out to a few people, and a gentleman came to me and he said, "Listen, I wasn't at this most recent event, but my wife was." And he said, "I want to support your organization." And he slid me $2,000. And when I tell you that story is, the structure of an organization is always an executive director and or an executive and artistic director. And that was the role when we became formalized as a 501c3. Mm-hmm. I took on. I shaped the organization, and I shaped the artistic perspective. So I served both of those roles. But always above you is a board. And that board is usually your funders, but it's also the people who can connect you to the other people that you want to connect to. And so my board members, they always give the same things, no matter how big or small your organization is: their time, their talent, and their treasure, right? So their time was helping me organize these events, connecting to the public schools, planning events, creating marketing materials, fundraising.
Absolutely.
Right?
Big one.
Connecting you to other organizations that can help you as partner organizations, and also connecting you to foundations and granting institutions that can also help fund these ideas that you hope to make happen. And then you need a team. None of us can do it on our own. The biggest part of Artists Now is the beginning and the end. The beginning, I was doing it on my own. And if you really wanted to make a big difference, a sustained difference, you had to build a team. So that's important to know. And when I tell you the end of the story of Artists Now, you'll know why the team is important as well. So we formed a team, and they were an amazing team. And I love that team, and I love what we were able to accomplish together. And I think we made a difference in that community. So underneath that team, you need sub-teams that are often, for small organizations, volunteers. And what we know about volunteers is they're passion-driven only. You're not paying them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the important is to have a powerful message, to make a powerful impact, and to tell that story in a powerful way. The biggest failure of Artists Now was at the end of the organization. I was flying back and forth for 2 years at their request to keep on running the organization, even after I moved somewhat abruptly. And what I was only later realized is I was highly unsuccessful, was that I didn't build a future for Artists Now that did not center around me. I built that organization around me, around my interests, around my passions, around my ability to communicate,
Right.
and around my connections to artists. And when I left, that organization failed within 6 months. And that's not any way should be read as that I was so darn important. That it was an utter failure on my part to build a sustainable entity. And so the lesson I took away from that is everything I try to build now, I try to build without any one person, but especially myself at the center. It has to be built around ideas, not an individual.
Wow, powerful message. So, yeah, that's a great story to kind of illustrate that, and I think will be very relevant to one of the topics we're about to talk to in a moment about how people can do this in the context of schools. But before we get there, I mean, one of the things I would love, just in the 15 minutes we've been on, 20 minutes, I mean, you've rattled off like an amazing array of people you've had the pleasure of working with or collaborating with, or guest artists that have come in through DePaul or any of these other schools, organizations that you've been involved in. So what are some of the characteristics that you see that like kind of stretch across these folks that are out there moving and shaking and doing, that someone that maybe watching, listening to this, wants to start, but they're not, they're not sure what they're missing, and they're looking to learn, and like they're hungry to kind of make some change. Like, what are some characteristics? Maybe it's books they read, maybe it's things they do, habits they build. What are some of the kind of common threads you've seen across all of these people that you've been able to interact with in your career?
That's a great question, Seth. You make this easy. Thank you very much. Great. I'll tell you a little bit about the characteristics, but I'm also going to frame it within the 5-stage framework that I use when launching projects.
Sure, please do. Right.
Yeah, so there'll be a little toggling back and forth, but maybe it'll be helpful for your folks to think about the attributes and the characteristics that go behind what I witness in successful, what I like to think of as revolutionary artists, or artist entrepreneurs, and then also kind of the process through which they move.
Sure.
Whether intentionally or because of the influence of other support systems, or maybe even just kind of following and stumbling through their path. And by the way, none of this is linear, but I'll share it in a somewhat linear way. So this month on 21cm.org, just in the next couple of days here, we're doing a feature piece on Mike Block. And I mentioned Mike earlier. And Mike's somebody relatively new in my world. I've only known Mike for about a year or so. But Mike is an incredibly charismatic person. So I want to talk about his attributes a little bit, because I think, Yo-Yo Ma calls him the quintessential 21st century musician.
Right.
It always begins with the fact that he is a spectacular, refined, beautiful artist. You can't do any of this without artistry, and it's incredibly dangerous to think that you can. And in my particular role as the director of 21CM, and somebody that hopes to play a small role on the national stage in these discussions, I always want to share and defend the ground that you have to develop your artistry. There's no way around this. This is not a substitution for great artistry. This is something that partners beautifully with great artistry, and I think very naturally.
Absolutely.
And so when I look at somebody like Mike is a stunning artist, right? He went to Cleveland, he went to Juilliard, spent a lot of time woodshedding in the practice room, embracing what my friend Dave Taylor, the great bass trombonist, says is embracing the joy of the struggle, right? Putting in those hours of practice. And so Mike's authentic as well, right? So he's a great artist and he's authentic. And what I mean by authentic is Mike is true to himself. Mike follows his passions. Now, in a recent interview with Mark McCoy, my humbly say colleague, and friend, but a genuine mentor.
Yeah, sure.
That's actually up on 21cm.org right now. Mike talks about early in his career, there is a lot of hustling that goes on. That everybody needs to know that as well. And Seth, you share that message in lots of powerful ways. But as you advance in your career, what you really want to do is stay authentic to your artistic vision and to the kinds of projects that you're really serious about, because not all projects financially pay off, but they might pay off in other ways that are more important.
Right.
Right? For me, we're trying to prepare the next generation to make the world a better place. And that means that their lives, their careers have to be a life of means in order to be able to provide for those that they love, a life of meaning, a chance and a sense of feeling like you're doing good work, and a chance to give back, which I think is profoundly important. You know, as artists, we were given a lot. Most of us would say this was not only a life-changing experience, but a life-saving experience to be involved in the arts. And I think we all owe something to give back. And I try to do that in my own small ways. And you see artists like Mike who really embody that. So Mike is authentic. He's a great artist. But here's what I would say that moves us into the conversation about the framework.
Sure.
Is that you have to be curious. You have to pay attention to the world around you and identify the kinds of opportunities that you want to engage, to see needs and gaps and opportunities, and to create innovative solutions that move your career forward, that build stronger communities, you know, and however it is that you want to move through the world. So being curious is so important. I just met this young gal, Olivia, when I was at the Curtis session. We spoke with 110 summer campers at Curtis.
Yeah, the Curtis Summerfest students.
Yeah, pretty kids. And this gal, Olivia, I'd love it if she heard this blog. Hope she's following you.
What did she play?
Clarinet.
Clarinet. My friend is the director of the whole Curtis Summerfest thing. I will send him the link.
Yeah, great. Please do. To Eastman this year, and she said, you know, I really am serious about doing this, but I do have a lot of people telling me to have a fallback plan. But it's not my mom and it's not my dad. My mom and dad are saying, go for it. And she was looking for some advice there. And I think maybe sometimes at a blush, somebody would you know, think that, you know, some of us are telling kids kind of the old story, unless you're really passionate about this, find something else to do. My own daughter's headed off to school this year, and she's going to double major in music and psychology. And if she had just chosen violin performance, I would tell her, absolutely go for it. Practice as hard as you can, gain as many experiences as you can, throw yourself 100% in. But the important thing is remain open. I told you a little bit about the beginning of my career. If I had stayed closed and said, no, I'm only going to play in the Chicago Symphony and maybe I'll settle for Cleveland, I probably wouldn't be in CSO or Cleveland. And I'd probably be unhappy or maybe even bitter. We all know a few bitter musicians. Right?
Yeah.
When I played in New York a lot, when I was gigging in New York, I met a whole bunch of bitter musicians, and it was really hard to be around it. It
is. It's tough.
It deflates your spirit. And so when I told this gal, Olivia, I said, just remain curious. That doesn't mean practice less. That doesn't mean don't go to the great institutions that are also forging opportunities for you to explore the profession during the 21st century, rather than the 17th. But you know, but stay curious and stay open. So I think the first attribute, in addition to being a great artist and authentic, is be curious. You look at somebody like Mike Block, and Mike launched the Global Musician Workshop on our campus 2 years ago. He just wrapped up his second season. And we did it. We always thought we're talking about 2017. He goes, now let's go for it. 2016. We have like 3 months to put this thing together. Within 10 weeks, he had 100 people, which is the maximum we're going to take, sign up from 35 different nations. Iraq,
wow.
Syria, Iran, I mean, all around the globe. Because it was an incredible idea. He was curious about the need and the gap and the opportunity he wanted to create. So if curiosity is about problem finding, then creativity is about problem solving. You know, we boast that we're all these creative artists, but truth be told is our institutions aren't really teaching us to be that creative, by and large. Some degree programs are more creative than others, but mostly they're recreative. Mostly they're recreative. We have to teach people to truly understand the creative process or processes and to hone and foster that creativity. We need to do that better as academics, for sure. There's no question about it. And I think for most of your listeners, if you thought like, well, when was the last time I actually fostered my own creativity, at least for those in school, I bet they balk a little bit and are a little miffed by how little of their time they're overtly exercising their own creativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And then to hone your collaborative skills, right? So for me, stage one of the entrepreneurial project is to be curious, to identify needs, gaps, and opportunities, and to create innovative solutions that bring about meaningful change in your community, whether that's connecting to new audiences or forming new kinds of chamber opportunities or educational models And on 21same.org, we've got a million great examples of people who are doing remarkable work, right? So just go check out.
It's an enormous resource for anybody watching. They should absolutely go check it out and dig around. There's endless useful things there.
Well, thank you. And it's not branded as DePaul at all. It's branded as an idea, a conversation, right? So, it's the purpose is to speak to 20 and 30 somethings, that are out there working hard but need some kind of guidance, right? So, and some things are really practical, like how do you write a good artist bio, right?
Yeah.
You read a lot of people's artist bio and it's like, I conducted this orchestra, that orchestra, this orchestra.
Yeah. It's literally their resume just in paragraph form. Yeah.
And it's brutal to read. I mean,
it's awful. Angela Beeching was just on. We just shared it recently. We talked about that a little bit as well. It's it's funny.
The next stage is really another attribute that I think people want to exude. And kind of the phrase I use when I'm writing is critical optimism. But maybe a better way, critical optimism is, it's easy to be optimistic. It's maybe even easier to be pessimistic for some. But critical optimism is really believing that you can make a remarkable change. Whatever change is, a change in your own career, a change in the way the arts are embraced within your community, a change, a change in the kinds of music that you present, the ways in which you envision art music, or music broadly. But that you have to have some kind of plan, right? And so I really think of it as the believing game versus the doubting game. And the believing game is starting with the perspective that you can bring about meaningful change in your own career, within your community, and throughout the profession. But you need to have a map, or at least a scavenger hunt list where you can track this stuff down. And so it's a balance of being optimistic, but also being very purposeful and thoughtful about how you're. The other next two stages are a little bit easier to talk about, and I can share more briefly, is storytelling. You got to be able to tell a good story, verbally, in written format, and visually, right? And here's the thing is, it's a noisy world out there, and to cut through the static and to really have your ideas heard is a challenge. Now, listen, you're hanging out in your apartment right now, and you have a whole bunch of people who are attracted to your message. You found a way to tell a story that is compelling to people, and that they share it with others. You have Angela Beeching on your show. This is somebody who's at the peak of our profession, somebody I admire deeply, somebody who has really done just a remarkable service. But she's finding time in her incredibly busy schedule, I imagine, to speak with you because your story is compelling enough. So you got to be able to tell your story. If you can't get people excited about it, it's not nobody's going to break into your house some night and give you a job. I mean, you got to.
Yeah, that's true. It's so true. I mean, I don't want to derail that, but one thing I would say to anybody that's like, well, what does that mean? Good storytelling. I mean, there's a great book by an artist called Show Your Work, and his name is Austin Kleon. Anybody should read this book. I've probably talked about it like 10 times to anybody that's ever talked to me on here. But like, he talks about. It's all about like storytelling, and the best piece of advice in the whole book is show your process, not your product.
Oh, interesting.
So the whole kind of concept behind it is like you should be showing off, and this goes for anybody, whether it's a nonprofit, a freelancer, someone that has a site like I do, someone that's running a symposium like you have coming up. I mean, whatever it is, like the best and most engaging way, and I mean, this is what's worked for me. I follow this advice to the T, is to essentially kind of like stop trying to look like everybody else. Everybody, when they go to make a site for their ensemble, they want to make a personal bio, they want to write about their projects, whatever it is, they all look at what other people are doing and then they try to adapt it to them. And I think that's the worst way to go about it, because because they probably did the same thing, and the person they copied from did the same thing. It's a very watered down message. It's not authentic to you, but people respond to authenticity.
Yeah,
100%. Sorry,
yeah.
Rant over.
I mean, that's great. I enjoyed every second of that. I mean, that's where we started. We're talking about the example of Mike Block is authentic, right? And
absolutely.
At the institutional level, there was an article that was written about 12 years ago called the Juilliard Effect, where institutions were replicating Juilliard, trying to be we're the Juilliard of Central Pennsylvania. We're the
right.
And it's just, first off, they're not. And second off, they really shouldn't be trying to.
No, they shouldn't even try. There's already a Juilliard.
Yeah. And, it's this recent visit to your hometown there, I mean, one of the things that I really loved is these really powerhouse schools are all very interested in what one another's doing, but also understanding that each of us can occupy a unique position. I mean, in my estimation, in the real life game of musical chairs, there's a seat for everybody.
Absolutely.
Right? But again, not if you're trying to, if I'm trying to take your seat or you're trying to take my seat. I mean, probably neither of us will really do particularly well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So storytelling, and I want to emphasize the visual part of it is, like you said, a website or of course, we're as part of the 21 Symposium upcoming. We have a competition for emerging artists, and we have 5 remarkable finalists. And we were originally going to give them a recording contract, and what we really realized was more valuable to the emerging artists of today is to get them a really slick, high-produced, beautifully, really artistically crafted music video. And artists right away responded to that, knowing that that's a big way of telling their story. So
yeah, absolutely. Video is like being hands down the most effective platform, like in all of the things. I mean, it does very well.
Yeah, so whether it's short films or videos or whether it's just crafting a logo that speaks to your brand and whatever it is visual storytelling is important. The 4th stage is funding priceless ideas, and funding priceless ideas means you have to be again authentic when you want to communicate to people about why your ideas matter and why they can connect to their own, those people who you're hoping to partner with, why they speak to their own passions. And sure. I can tell you that I'm rarely in conversations that are less authentic when it's people talking about money. It's important to talk about money. Yeah, it's important to talk about money. It's important that people understand how money works. And some of that's just money management and all of those kinds of pieces, which are really important. The fact that your budget reflects your values, people Absolutely. Have to understand. I have a friend who does a lot of work on Broadway, and his job is he's kind of the gatekeeper of who spends what. And so you could think he's kind of a bean counter, or, we could describe this guy in a lot of ways. He's quite the opposite. He is the gatekeeper. He says, every dollar I want to spend, I want to see it on stage. If I can't see it on stage, you got a tough sale for me. So if people are asking for money, more marketing money, he understands that that's important and there has to be a certain budget for that, but that's a much harder sell for him than, we need to expand upon this artistic element. We need a staging prop that's complicated and pricey, but it's going to make the artistic output better. The costumes are over budget, but it's worth it. He really cares deeply about it. But so talking about money and understanding how other people think about money is incredibly important. So people don't throw money at something because you want them to. People don't throw money at things that aren't going well. People invest in ideas, and they invest in ideas because they impact people.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if you could talk about one of the easiest fundraising projects I had was just past fall. I was brand new on the gig here at Paw, and we decided we wanted kids to be able to take, those kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch programs, to take lessons for free. This matters to me. I was on welfare my entire childhood, and somehow or another, with 9 kids in my family, all within 10 years and 2 months.
Wow.
Right? Big Catholic family, right? And somebody found a way for me to take private lessons with a remarkable teacher my whole childhood. Somebody found ways for me to take private solfege lessons with a really remarkable guy, and to participate in lots of musical opportunities. And I don't know how that happened, and I thank my parents every time we talk for it. But what I will say is there are many people that made that possible, and to talk to people and tell them why it matters. Begin with why, right? Simon Sinek. And when you're talking about why music changes and even saves lives, and that those at the margins especially need the opportunity, deserve, or are it's important to share that opportunity with those folks, that's not a hard sell. People respond to that. We've done very well in Putnam County to make that possible. And I think people in every community across this country, if you can convey who you'll impact and why this matters, I think you do well. But to understand how to fund ideas, whether that's crowdfunding, grant writing, speaking with donors, in-kind gifts are something you should never forget about. There are people that are doing things already and have the resources that you need, and simply partnering with them provides resources that you that you really don't want to have to replicate and likely couldn't replicate.
Right. Totally. Yeah. So we're moving kind of in the home stretch here, Mark, and I want to make sure we get to this last topic because I really want to hear you dig into this a little bit. So one of the things that a lot of people out there are probably wondering, I mean, you have an enormous resume of experience working in higher education, and not just talking about doing these projects and starting them, but actually implementing and executing. So for someone out there, whether they are, maybe they're even just a teaching a TA, a teaching assistant, or they're an adjunct professor, or they're associate professor part-time somewhere, or people that are full-time faculty. There's I guarantee at least 2 or 3 of them that are of each of those people that are going to see this or reading my stuff. I hear from them. I know they're there. Yeah. What would you tell them if they were wanting to get something started similar to what you've done, or something in this space of implementing this in the context of higher education? What are some pieces of advice and kind of action steps that they should do, and what should they be looking for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. It's interesting because the 5th stage of this process is called ideas to action, and it's really about now how do you actually make it happen. And I can tell you that for me, my life is pretty tightly scheduled. I have 3 awesome teenagers, and I've got a fabulous wife who I work pretty hard to keep liking me. And I have some projects at the university and then outside of the university that I'm busy with. And so finding ways to move ideas to action is critical. And for me, I do love talking about ideas, but only when I know they're going to come to life. So your question is spot on. A lot of academics do enjoy talking about ideas, but maybe aren't in the business of moving them into the marketplace. I think it's time to move them to the marketplace. So I'll tell you that I have a project coming up, and there are a lot of people involved. This is not just me, but it's called Creating the Revolutionary Artist, a 21CM Guide to Music Entrepreneurship. And this will be available to a limited number of people as we beta test it, truly around the globe, across the country, from New York to Texas, El Paso, and across the globe in Japan and Egypt and India and Greece and across Europe. And this resource will be available on 21cm.org about a year and a half from now. But what it really does is it asks people to partner with my team, but they are partnering with us. And what it is basically, if you're thinking about in the academic setting, it's what we call a flipped classroom or a hybrid classroom, meaning there are people on campuses across the nation who know that they must prepare their students to think more entrepreneurially, and that their students are reaching out to resources like you, Seth, and others who are doing it, but that they also know within the academic institution, they have an obligation to do this. And not every school has like a Curtis, Mary, who's just this,
That's Mary Javian, for those that aren't familiar.
Yeah.
Who's a total firecracker in the world of this stuff.
Yeah.
She kills it.
Everything from ideas to action and cross-border.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Dave Cutlers in the world down in South Carolina, and the Jeff Niches at UC Boulder. There are some remarkable people out there in the world doing stuff, but not everybody has that faculty member. So the goal of this is that all of the lectures, all of the readings, all of the assignments, everything you normally get in a classroom is delivered to you online through 21cm.org. You'd enter a portal and you'd be able to do that. So you'd hear my lectures, but lots of other readings, related articles from some of the best thinkers in the world right now. People that we hire at 21cm.org, from the New York Times, LA Times, Rolling Stone magazine. And then all that would be there, but that you would come and you'd go to a workshop at DePauw, and in 5 days we'd train the trainer. And what we're asking you to do is partner with us on this, where you'd come and you'd not only understand how to use the book from the faculty perspective, but also from the student perspective.
Right.
And you would go back, and our role would be to deliver lectures and assignments and all of that, to give that 5-stage framework to the student, provide great examples like Mike Block and so many other organizations out there that are doing great things. People like Vijay Gupta and the Street Symphony out in LA, and all these incredible folks out there in the world. But then we would prepare you to get your ideas into the marketplace. So whether you're moving your own ideas or whether you're working with a group of students, in real time you do real world projects that present real world challenges, that demand real world solutions, so that you make the world around you, whether it's down the street or around the globe, a better place. And so this resource we're really excited about. There's some stunning people that are involved, including your friend Mary. Mm-hmm. But Rachel Robertson from NEC and lots and lots of folks. And so how do you do that? Part of it is you start by starting. You create a vision, which is something that's both inspirational and aspirational. Something where you say, this is the world change in the world I hope to become, that I hope to move into the marketplace. And then the mission statement, of course, is the ways in which you'll implement that. And then you think creatively about the problem you want to solve. You think collaboratively about the team you want to build. You create a feasibility study so that you understand, even if that's something very informal. There's a great tool that Gary Beckman down at North Carolina State University uses, and many other people do too, but Gary uses it beautifully. It's the business model canvas. Yeah, it's that business model canvas that helps you really detangle your ideas into real actions, right?
Okay. Sorry, so the dog is getting in on the interview here.
That's all right. Good to see your dog. And then to start telling stories in profound ways, and then get into the messy, fertile space of the artist entrepreneur and take some actions and stick with it. And I guess I'm going to circle all the way back, is like I was telling Olivia there and Curtis, be curious about the change you want to bring about and to pay attention to the world around you. That's what artists are supposed to do, right?
Right.
See the world from a unique perspective and share it with others. That's the definition of an artist. And it means taking action, though. It doesn't mean, be divergent for a little while, think of all the possibilities, but that at some point or another converge on the idea that you want to bring about.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you just said start by starting. Because that's the thing that I'm sure you, me, everybody watching or listening, whether it's them or a friend they know or a person they know, like it's like we've all at some point had read some book or heard some interview or something and thought like, oh my God, that would be so cool if I could do these things, do the Juilliard for the Midwest or whatever it is, or the Uber of music education or whatever it is.
Right.
And it's like, but so few people ever actually people ask me all the time, like, well, how should I do this? And like, well, what have you done yet? They're like, well, I haven't done anything yet. I'm doing it. It's like, no, the first thing you should do is start. It might work. It might blow up in your face. It doesn't matter. The point is to get started, because there's nothing to talk about further until you actually have implemented, taken steps that, oh, that didn't work, or that did work. How can I replicate that, or why didn't it work?
And to connect to people around you, for sure. And there's a great story about Ernest Hemingway, and he's sitting around a table. Well-known story, I guess. Sitting around a table with some other artists, and they say, well, why are you so verbose in all of your prose? And can't you just tell a story in a more concise space? And his response is, for sale, baby shoes, never worn, right? And in those 6 words, there's this enormous story, right? There's all this backstory, and as a parent, that that really resonates with you. Wow, there's a big backstory to that. What I challenge my students to do when we think about storytelling is to challenge them to ask themselves in 6 words alone, taking the 6-word challenge, what is your story, right? What is it that I'm 51 years old. I don't think about it as, my vision statement anymore. I think about it as my epitaph, right? I'm closer to that part of my life than I am kind of that wild-eyed guy, heading off to college or just getting. Yeah. But, for me, if I were to write my own epitaph, at least in part, it would say my 6-word story: make life a work of art. And for me, if you think like a composer, you think like an artist, you have a blank canvas, or you have a blank stave. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with that? And just like a composer doesn't start from the top left-hand corner and perfectly scribes out an entire symphony, right? You're going to stop. You're going to start. You're going to redirect. You're going to even crumple it up and throw it away, and then maybe even pull it back out of the trash can and flatten it out and wonder if there actually is something here, right? But you have to start at some point or another. So, I guess the most generic advice I have, I mean, the book that's coming out, it will offer enormous detail. This is a colossal project.
Sure.
And in concept, in fairness, I mean, to critique myself, I've been thinking about writing it for about 8 years. And thankfully, I finally took my own advice and started by starting. And it goes to the editor in October. We're pretty far down this path.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a gigantic resource. It's not just a book. There are videos in there and how-to documents and a ton of stuff. But it is just start by starting. And part of it is I can't no longer not do this project. And the reason for me that drives me is the field needs something where simultaneously we prepare 2 generations of artist entrepreneurs, because as an academic, I can't feel good about being in the profession unless I know that I've at least made an attempt at providing great kids, like my own daughter going off to music school or Olivia heading off to Eastman, the opportunity to be curious, to be creative, to be collaborative, and to move their ideas into the marketplace. There are a lot of great examples out there. The Project Trios, the Roomfuls of Teeth, the Gabriel Alegrias, the Mike Blocks, the Global Musicians Workshop, in your hometown, Play on Philly is crushing it.
Yeah.
El Sistema at the national level. People like Vijay Gupta, 19 years old, wins a gig in the LA Phil. What does he do? Instead of doing what so many of us would do, like, great, I'm just going to keep on practicing. I made it. He starts Street Symphony. He plays concerts down in Skid Row, where there's the densest population of homeless in the country. These are people who have a life of means, a life of meaning, and are giving back. That's the goal.
Wow, great stuff. That's really powerful stuff, Mark. So where can people learn more? We're right at the end of our time here. I want to make sure that people can find you, learn more. Where should people go to learn more? I mean, we've covered like a million things here, and I'm going to try to get as many links in the show notes on the site. But where can people go to learn more about you, this work, and this stay in touch? So when this project is up and available, people can actually, and the symposium that's coming up in September of 2016. Where can they learn more about all of this?
Well, the symposium is way more interesting to me, so I'll start with that. The symposium is September 9, 10, and 11. It's in Greencastle, Indiana, which is about 45 minutes west of Indianapolis. And almost all the artists I've named, and a whole bunch more, including the Kronos Quartet and just some stunning people. David Wallace from Berkeley. And so many people are going to be there, right? And so if you're a student, the day pass is $75. If you bring 9 friends of yours, I don't have 9 friends, but if you probably have way more than. if anybody who's a student that comes in a group of students, the day pass is $35. The Kronos concert alone is worth more than $35, and that's one of 20 things happening that day. So check out the 21 Symposium. If you can't go to it, on Facebook, 21CM Community, like us there. We're going to live stream some of the events, at least interviews with some of the people that are there, so we can connect back to you. I also hired the team from Live at the Met to come in and video capture everything.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be, over the next year, sharing those Talk 21s that we're creating, opening with Greg Sandow. I call him the voice of the revolution. But, a lot of other really engaging, interesting people. So the 21 Symposium's cool. Come and like us at 21CM Community. I put one thing a day at the most out there, right? It's just ideas. Go to 21cm.org and sign up for the monthly newsletter. You get one newsletter a month that just alerts you that the next issue's out, and it tells you what kind of things are out there. All of this is for 20 and 30-somethings. There's nothing about me. There's nothing about DePauw. It's about ideas always. That was the way it's conceived. That's the way we stay true. I've got the most brilliant thinker on the planet as my editor, Elizabeth Hinckley, and she keeps us honest and makes sure that everything that goes up there is great quality. So 21cm.org, 21cm on Facebook. There are 2 Mark Rabideaus on Facebook. Unabashedly, I share that. There's this guy, right? Go like him. And then there's this guy dancing with somebody way too pretty for you. You'll kind of double take like this. Yeah. That's the real Mark Rabideau. If you want to know something about what's going on with my kids' tennis tournaments, my son won the back draw in a big tournament last year.
Bravo. I just finished reading Andre Agassi's autobiography again. If your kid's into tennis and he hasn't read it, you should totally read it. It's like mind-blowingly good.
Oh, I'll thank you for that
It's
recommendation.
called Open. It's like the best autobiography of like a high performing athlete. Like I've read a handful, but it is mind blowingly good.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'll definitely get a hold of that. Yeah. So on 21cm.org, a couple times, 4 times a year, we have a book club. We're doing Victor Wooten's book to start the year, and you'll have a chance to ask Victor your questions. So follow the book club. I'll start advertising it soon, and then in September we'll start doing the book club, and in October we'll air Victor's interview of your questions. Then the next book we're doing is Bruce Adolph. Bruce is one of the most amazing guys you could possibly meet. I mean, we would need a whole nother show. You should contact Bruce and have him interview. He
Adolph,
is
Madoff.
Adolph,
Adolph.
yeah, Adolphe, right? He's the piano puzzler on NPR. He works at.
Okay, I know who you're talking about. I don't know much about him, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
Great guy.
I'll look him up. Cool.
Beautiful book. So yeah, so come and check us out there, and I think just get in the conversation, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Awesome. Well, Mark, thanks so much for coming on here. I really appreciate it. This was an unbelievably dense treasure trove of resources, people, things to check out. So I hope everyone does that, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Seth. This was a lot of fun. Thanks.